Jeff. Appreciate it. So let me just confirm with you all. Today is Friday, January 27th, 2023. Pretty exciting. And I want to just help you confirm you're with Marin Conservation League's Agricultural Land Use Committee. We meet quarterly, and with co-chairs Jeff Stump and Rick Holland. We just want to thank you, Rick, thank you for pitching in now and kind of moving into a little more formal co-chair role. We really appreciate that. We have board members with Marin Conservation League, and we have friends of Marin Conservation League. So on several of our issues committees, we have folks like Rick that are pitching in and providing extra volunteer help, but also bandwidth and expertise. So really appreciate it, Rick. So in true typical fashion for this committee meeting, let me just start and confirm that you're in the right meeting at the right time. I think we'll go over the agenda in a minute, but just want to kind of say all things Marin Conservation League. We're really excited. I'll put some things in the chat here. Really excited to have a new newsletter out. So the January-February 2023 newsletter is out, and you can go and find that. Our new website's growing and lots of things happening there. So I'll just route you to the newsletter. I mean, to the website in general. And then a couple other things that are always helpful is our issues committees. That's really the way you can learn what we're doing, the different committees that we have, what they're working on, and how they're advancing Marin Conservation League's mission. And always make a plug for membership. We would love if you're not a member. That's how you would get the newsletter regularly from us, is by being a member. You'll get invitations to other events that we host. I think if we just recently hosted Jared Huffman for an evening session around climate. So in our climate action working group. So if you're interested and wanting to learn more about what we're doing, that's the best way. Become a member. Also, just
e-news also.
Yeah, e-news is there. That's right. Recently. You'll get the newsletter. You're right, Nona. Thank you for plugging that. We put out e-news twice weekly. That's a great way to really keep tabs of what we're doing. Our newsletter comes out with in-depth articles and then learning about our committees. And other board members are on. I just want to make a plug and get something on your calendar. I believe it's Friday, April 22nd, will be our next annual meeting. So more to come on that, more details, but that's always a wonderful gathering. We get to see, like Kevin said at the start of this meeting, we get to see old friends and make new friends. Usually we have some honorees for our awards, and our new officers and board members will be introduced as well. So, so put Friday, April 22nd on your calendar. So let's focus in on what today is about. And for starters, I'm going to share the agenda just so you have, we can recap that. It went out to you earlier. So hopefully you're seeing a Word document and you're seeing the agenda. So we'll just do, I'm working through some of these introductions and housekeeping. We're going to do an all things Measure A, and particularly then take a deeper dive into the sustainable ag element in Measure A. But we're really lucky with a suite of presenters and panel members to help us do that. And I think really nice closing the loop moment for Marin Conservation League and local partners. And then we are going to spend just a little time at the end explaining to you some climate change policy statements that the Marin Conservation League's been working on, and two in particular that are moving forward and moving to states of readiness to be considered by the board. So we'll back up and give you context for why those policy statements are being written and what's the process for final review, approval, and board consideration in the coming months. I'll stop there and just say any questions about the agenda. We'll do introductions for our panel members here in just a sec, but any questions about the agenda or things folks want to ask or make sure be added to the agenda, you can use the chat. You can raise your hand if there's a question about the agenda. Not seeing anything, Jeff. So then let me we are how many on so far? Usually what I do for introductions is I'll just really quickly share with you who registered. Of course, you can use the participant list in Zoom. So please do that to see who's on. You know, if we were in person, we'd go around the room and do introductions, but it's just more time efficient just to work through the registration list. Hope you're seeing an Excel file and those names are large enough. We had 40 people register. I think we're about 20 something now. I forget the number. Yeah, so that happens. Lots of people register and then something happens in the morning. What's nice about these meetings and all of Marine Conservation League's issues committee meetings is we record them and we post them on our YouTube channel. So if folks miss it, they'll get a notice of where to go to see the meeting. So I'll just slowly work through here. This is who registered. Again, you can use the participant list to see who's on today. Hopefully I'm not moving too fast. Slow down just the littlest bit. I'll thumbs up then, kind of context for who's signed up and who's on. I'll stop share. Please do use chat, and let me say that then that's how we'll proceed. We can take time towards the end of our panel to pause and have you unmute and offer questions, but as we work into our first agenda item, all things Measure A, I just coach you to use the chat for your questions. Jeff and Rich will help us monitor those and at the right times come back to them and make sure they get asked of our panel members. So with that, let me pause and just say we're at a really exciting moment, I think, here, 2023. We have Max Korten from Parks and Kevin Wright, and just where Measure A is now with the extension. I think, you know, last April, May, maybe even this time last year, we were all kind of holding our breath, if you remember. We weren't quite sure where things were going to land. And it's a moment to say thank you to the likes of Susan Stomp and I think even former board member Roger Roberts in the way they really rallied and represented MCL through a partnership to work on the Measure A campaign. And so really I wanted today to be a little bit as it starts, particularly for Max, just a chance to pause and maybe not necessarily celebrate, but acknowledge that it's extended and what that means for Marin County, for Marin Parks. And then as you see the agenda, we're going to work down inside the sustainable ag element. So it's kind of both moments of just taking that pause and with Parks and MCL, just a moment to reflect on where we're at with the extension of Measure A. And then for the ag land use part, really diving into the sustainable ag, the different parts inside that. And there's some exciting news and developments coming that Kevin and Nancy and Lily are all going to help us with. So I'll just kind of, as they come up, I'll introduce them, but maybe with that setup and kind of context, ask Max to kick us off. Director Max Korten of Marin County Parks is here just to give us an overview and just kind of start the all things Measure A session for us. Thank you, Max.
Thanks, David, and thanks everybody for this opportunity to talk about Measure A. And apologies, I have to jump off at 10:30. But just real quick, I wanted to go back in time for a minute and just kind of like tell in a very brief version the story of how we got here with Measure A. As you remember, back in like June of the year before last, Most had done a survey and found there was strong support for an extension of Measure A, and our Board of Supervisors directed our staff to go ahead with coming up with the expenditure plan for a renewal of the measure. And to figure out what that would look like, we put out a survey, got over 2,000, I think, responders to the survey. We met with over 45 organizations, including this one, to get feedback. And then we had a long iterative process of presenting to our commission, to the board, getting more community feedback, and sort of going through different iterations of what that expenditure plan might look like and how it might be evolved. And then about 1 year ago, right at the beginning of February, the board approved the expenditure plan and put the measure on the ballot. And like David said, then a lot of the folks here on this call went to work telling the story of Measure A, getting the word out, and a huge appreciation to all of you. Really thankful in the election to see such strong support for the measure in June, and it passed. So since then, we've been in the process of getting it rolling. We just started, at the end of October is when the tax actually went into effect and we start receiving revenue. So we really just started receiving revenue from the new measure. But we've just been putting everything in place to make sure we have all the agreements set up and programs so that the new measure can roll forward. And the way that the expenditure plan of the extended measure looks is mostly the same, but slightly different than the old version. The big sort of buckets are similar. There's 20% for sustainable agriculture, 15% for cities and town parks, and 65% for Marin County parks and open space. And, the total that we expect to bring in sales tax is about $16 million in the course of a typical year. Of course, this year it'll be less because the tax didn't start at the beginning of our fiscal year. And then the way that the sustainable ag portion, which is what we're focusing on today, is broken up. Out of that 20%, 20% of the 20% goes to the RCD, which I'm sure Nancy's going to talk about in a little bit. And then 50% goes to a grant program for preservation of ag land for the purchase of agricultural easements. And then 30% goes to a brand new grant program, the Sustainable Agricultural and Food Systems Grant Program. I think is sort of where we haven't quite nailed down. I don't know the name of what that program is, but there's a whole list of things in the measure itself that describe what this program could fund, and it generates close to $1 million a year. And so that's really what Kevin's going to dive in and talk more about, is sort of how we're developing what that program would look like and how it might work. And we've a huge appreciation to Kevin, who's been, and to David too, who's been sort of like our guide to engaging with the agricultural and community gardens and food systems sort of community to sort of build our network, because of course this isn't necessarily our area of expertise in parks. So the partnership really is helpful for its success. So with that, I will turn it over to Kevin, unless folks have any questions.
Let me intercede just a little bit and just remind people, and I see Terry Thomas on, who's the chair of Marine Conservation League's Parks Committee. So, you mentioned 65% is going to Marin parks and 15% is going to city and town parks. And there will be many times, I think, over the coming years where Terry and that Parks Committee would engage on that topic. But I just wanted to pause, and I don't know if, Max, there's any like 3 or 4 high-level priorities you want to share today about that park section, and then we can move on to the ag.
Yeah. Sure.
Knowing that you need to leave us at 10:32, I just wanted not to lose your input.
Yeah, I think, well, the cities and towns piece is very similar to the old measure. One thing that's really new about the parks and open space part is that there's a specific 25% of the 65% set aside for fuels reduction, vegetation management work. And so, that's something that's sort of unique. It's what we heard, every time that we've done a survey in the last 5 years or so, as by far the top priority from the community for our work is that sort of vegetation management fuels component. And so that's an important part of the extended measure. Of course, I'm sure Terry and Nona and Rick and Greg and Larry, Susan, all the people who are engaged in our parks and open space conversations are probably pretty aware of all of our priorities. the road and trail work that John Campo's team leads, the sea level rise adaptation work and restoration work that Veronica Pearson leads on our team. We have a number of really exciting potential park and open space acquisitions where Measure A is leveraging a considerable amount of outside funding that our team is working on at Bald Hill and the Martha property in Tiburon. There's quite a bit more than that, but I won't dive too deep because of course that's my usual world and I could talk forever about it, but want to make sure we
No, perfect. I just wanted that highest level context, and that we definitely, through Marin Conservation League, and then as you acknowledge, you have a commission, there's lots of places that other part of Measure A is being engaged on and supported. And just thank you. So with that, I don't know if there are any other, knowing that we'll let Max sign off when he needs to. Are there any specific questions for Max at this stage? And you can always come back if you have one. So with that, then maybe, Kevin, please, can we hand it off to you to kind of set us up further for this dive into this sustainable ag portion? Yep.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, David. And I just want to say a big thank you to all of you for helping out with the campaign and for helping to pass Measure A. It's really giving us sort of a big future and a lot to look forward to. So I'm personally really excited about the next 9 years and really grateful to you all. I'm going to share my screen with a presentation. I'm going to do this presentation in 2 parts. I'm going to kind of reiterate some of what Max said and dive a little bit deeper into this new program he mentioned that covers sustainable agriculture, and then hand it over to Lily and Nancy to present a little bit about some of the projects they're working on and some of the intersections with this funding source. And then I'm going to circle back and actually talk in more detail about some of the conversations we've been having in the community in the last few months and how this grant program is actually shaping up currently. So with that, I'm just going to pull up this PowerPoint.
And Kevin, I've put your Measure A link, the Parks Measure A link, in the chat as well.
Oh, great.
Yep.
Okay. Good. Just going to see if this will. Great. Everybody see the full screen version of that? Excellent. So this is just a quick recap of who Marin County Parks is. We're 43 parks, 34 preserves across the entire county that are kind of integrated with a lot of other public lands and communities. And we do a lot of different types of work to protect and steward those lands together with all of you and residents across the county. So here are just a few images of some of that work that I'll mention in just a moment. So we do all that work, and we're also the administrator of this quarter-cent sales tax Measure A that you all know about, Max mentioned. First passed in 2012, it was re-implemented in 2022 with strong voter support, and it covers a wide range of types of work and categories. So within parks, some of the work that's been done in the past 9 years and will continue is the wildland fire fuel prevention work and vegetation management. The parks maintenance, like out here at Bothene Marsh, path paving, all kinds of activities, and a lot of trail improvements for all users. We do a lot of social equity work connecting people to parks, so a lot of group visits and programs that probably you participated in. And then a lot of conservation and stewardship work like wetland restoration, sea level rise adaptation, and biodiversity and research work. So that's all been funded in a strong way by Measure A. We also have a lot of programs that we grant out to communities. So we've had a lot of experience in the last 9 years granting funding out. That includes formula grants to cities and towns. So we give several $1 million a year to 19 cities, towns, and special districts to improve your local parks, those pocket parks, tennis courts, other facilities in your local community that you can walk down the street to. And then a variety of grants through our farmland preservation program. As Max mentioned, the percentages are 65% to county parks open space, 20% to the sustainable agriculture category, and then 15% to cities and towns. And this is where we can view in more detail this breakdown. And I specifically want to call your attention to the blue bands, which show the new breakdown in the sustainable agriculture portion. So overall, that's 20% of Measure A. 50% goes toward grants for agricultural conservation easements. That's ensuring that our agricultural lands remain in productivity and protected for agriculture. And those grants have traditionally gone to MALT to fulfill their mission. We also give money out to the RCD. That amount increased in this last passage of Measure A from 5% of the total of the ag portion to now 20%. So the RCD will be doing a lot of great stewardship work using that funding and has done a really good job traditionally at matching that money 50% or more. Now, the middle blue band, this 30% is the new program, the Sustainable Agriculture and Food Systems Program. And this goes toward a wide range of possible activities. So this is just another slide describing those programs in general, but actually the one I want to call your attention to is this one. And the list here on the right kind of captures everything in the Measure A ordinance, Ordinance 3760, which basically was the document approved by voters that guides exactly how Measure A should be spent. It includes an expenditure plan that has specific language, and that's where these bullets come from. And so essentially what we're trying to do is create a grant program that captures all these areas of investment to broaden the investment in sustainable agriculture and food systems, and also fulfill a lot of unmet needs. So historically, in the last 9 years, the Measure A agricultural portion went to specific uses, but this is really broadening the types of investments we can make. So it includes things like carbon capture, environmental restoration, and regenerative agriculture, which occur on farmland. But then there are a lot of potential investments in communities in both Eastern and Western Marin. And it's around local food supply sustainability and community gardens, providing public access to agricultural lands, largely for activities like gleaning, and then increasing access to low-cost farmland and farming, which could occur both, say, in like subleases in West Marin properties, or in East Marin if we're going to sort of like clean up and develop faith-based properties and other locations that could be used for agriculture. So there have been a lot of ideas shared by some of our food sustainability networks and agricultural networks that I'll talk about in a bit. But at this point, I just want to take a break and stop my sharing and just hand it over to Lily and Nancy to talk a little bit more about their programs and the great work they're doing.
Thanks, Kevin, for that setup and comprehensive description of how the pieces fit together. That was really helpful to start with. I think we'll start with Lily Verdone from the Marin Agricultural Land Trust. And Lily, I can't remember if you were able to join us. I think our meeting in October, but you're definitely in your, I guess I'll call it the honeymoon period or your first year, but we're already, really appreciating the ways in which you're stepping in and engaging with the community. So thank you for taking on this leadership role with MALT, the new executive director. The floor is yours. And I'll put your Measure A, you have a Measure A page from your website. Yeah. I'll put it in the chat for you.
Thank you. Yeah, and thanks everybody. Really great to be here, and I appreciate it. And I just want to kind of preface my few minutes here is that I know that there's a lot of folks here who have a lot more history with MALT than I do. And so I appreciate all the support that I've been given in my honeymoon period, and also the support for Measure A. It's been really critical for us as an organization in the past, and then we're so excited to be implementing it into the future and have that opportunity. And so, yeah, everybody, nice to meet you. Lily Verdone, Executive Director for MALT, and I started at the end of August, and so it's been a period of time for me where it's been really sweet, I think I would say, is that I've been able to go out and spend a lot of time. I've called it my listening tour. I've been able to get out on the land, talk with as many people as possible, and really been able to process the needs of the community from an organization like MALT, and how we're viewed externally, how we view ourselves internally, and then thinking about how we're going to shape the next few years as we move forward, especially with this opportunity to be able to apply for and hopefully implement Measure A funds on conservation easements in Marin County. And I know that that the history of MALT and our origin story is pretty well known, but I would just, because Phyllis Faber just passed away, I wanted to remind everybody that MALT was founded in 1980 by Alan Strauss and Phyllis Faber, and really together they brought a broad coalition of ranchers and environmentalists and community leaders, and we're so forward thinking in how to protect farmland in Marin County and build out that first agricultural land trust in the country. And so since then, MALT has been so successful and protected over 55,000 acres of agricultural land in the county. And really it's in part to public funding like Measure A, as well as private donors. And so, like I said, I've been just out on a listening tour and really hearing what's needed in our community. And I think as a result of that, we're moving forward and refining our focus to work on 5 pillars, strategic pillars within the organization. And the first is preserving agriculture. Next is protecting biodiversity. The third is building climate resilience. The fourth is connecting our community. And then the fifth is strengthening our organization and continuing to mature. And so all those pieces are really kind of, things that we've been doing, but putting that focus on it will help us move forward and be successful in the next few years. And just a bit of on Measure A from MALT's perspective is that since it passed originally in 2012, Measure A has allowed Marin County to invest over $13 million in farmland preservation. And so with the support of Measure A, our team here at MALT has protected 12 farms and ranches, and that's close to 7,500 acres through the acquisition of agricultural conservation easements. And we've been really successful and efficient in our funding model, and we match the public-private funding. Often it's a one-to-one match with Measure A funds, as well as other state and federal funding sources, and that doubles the impact of our privately raised revenue as well as the public funds. And a few stats that are on our website, but we think about what agricultural preservation looks like in West Marin, and it's very diverse and very broad. And I like to think of that protection as the umbrella. As we use the tool to protect agricultural easements, we're getting so many stacked benefits from that, including the biodiversity, the climate resilience, fire resilience, freshwater protection, all of those pieces. And so with the Measure A investments that MALT has used, we protect 37 miles of stream, 4,500 acres of grassland, 1,600 acres of forest, 45 acres of wetlands, beef and cattle operations, a dairy, and one pasture operation, which everybody knows that's pretty critical right now with the price of eggs, and 2 row crop operations. And then in the next few years, we have a pipeline of easements that are already teed up. It's close to 4,000 acres that could qualify for Measure A funding. And so we're really excited to be able to build that up and think about that pipeline and how we can utilize these public funds to really protect private lands. And I think that that's one of those pieces is, why, what is the benefit of protecting private lands and using public funds to protect private lands? And I think for me, my background is in conservation. I've been in the conservation and climate resilience field for over 20 years. And through that time period, I have worked hand in hand with agricultural protection and stewardship of agricultural lands because of those stacked benefits that I mentioned earlier. There's so much that you can get with natural and working lands. And so MALT, the benefits of public benefits of MALT's agricultural conservation easements are really, first and foremost are protecting Marin agricultural resources so farmers and ranchers can continue to produce food and fiber locally. And so that's huge economic benefit, all of those pieces, and thinking about, you know, our food and how we get it. And then next, the easements also protect valuable habitat, and including these riparian areas and wildlife corridors that are so critical, and other natural resources like water, which we've seen is, you know, obviously right now we're feeling a little bit less stress on the water side, but come summer, you know, we'll see where we're at. And then really the idea of easements, and then also the stewardship assistance that MALT helps out with, really mitigates and builds resilience to climate change, including the sequestration of carbon, and clean water and wildfire resilience. And, you know, this is something that's really important to me, because I think that the protection of ag land sometimes gets a bad rap, but the scientific research, and now it's being confirmed by public policy, both in the state and federal level, and 30 by 30 initiative is a really good example of that, is that land conservation is our greatest tool to fight against climate change. And so land preservation and stewardship work that's supported by Measure A funds is one of the best responses locally that we can do to combat climate change and build resilience. And so it's really, for me, that feels so tangible and broad across all of our issues. And it's exciting to be able to continue to work in that space. So I think I'll pause there and pass it over to Nancy.
Yeah, and please again, Lily, thank you. And please again, use the chat, make note of your questions, and we'll have time to kind of open things up. So again, really appreciate you already so quickly stepping in and taking on leadership. And thank you for being here today, Lily. Next is Nancy Scolari, the Executive Director for the Marin Resource Conservation District. We've benefited from Nancy's input on carbon farming and other things around the Marin Carbon Project, maybe even a year ago. I'm trying to remember when, but we really wanted Nancy to come today, and given the extension of Measure A and its focus on conservation and soil and water conservation on working lands, and particularly the way in which the RCD is instrumental in that inside Measure A, we wanted Nancy to help us understand how does it look coming forward in 2023 with the new Measure A extension. So Nancy, thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, so first about timing. Are we good on time? I don't want to go over. Okay, great. So I'm going to share my screen. I have a little presentation to show you. I couldn't help myself. Sorry. So what I'd like to do is just, well, first of all, you know, we've kind of gone over this, but the RCD and Measure A, this is the exact language that's in the ordinance. And so, you know, 20% is going to go to the RCD to provide matching grants. And so what we've defined that to be is a 1-to-1 matching grants for the purpose of implementing carbon farm plans and similar projects on working agricultural lands, which will support and enhance water quality, soil health, biodiversity, wildlife corridors, riparian zones, erosion control, climate resiliency, and safeguard wildlife habitat and pollinators. Super easy, right? So that's what we're tasked with. But before I get into that, I just wanted to take a moment to step back and talk about Marine Conservation League and just sort of how responsible you are for us being where we are today. So, and just a whole lot of gratitude to all of you for the support that you've shown this through time. So the last couple of years, we've been really busy. So back in October of 2020, of course, the Marin CAP and the Ag chapter was revised. That was approved, and it supported carbon farming and the idea of carbon farming. Following that, the county stepped up and said, okay, now that this is sort of a sanctioned activity, we're going to provide you $50,000 to match a coastal conservancy proposal that was then awarded by the Coastal Conservancy in December of 2021. And that was for $1 million. That was through Prop 68, and Marine Conservation League supported that proposition. In June of 2020, as you know, Measure A passed, it was approved. MCL supported that. And thank you very much for those of you, some key folks. I know Terry, Nona, Susan, many more really went to bat for the RCD's allocation, and super thankful for that. And that's giving us about $6 million over the course of the measure. Then most recently in November of last year, we were awarded $2.4 million through the USDA Climate Smart Commodities grant program, and that's to the RCD. All told, our partners are receiving additional funds. The UC Extension and MALT and AIM are all told receiving about $4.5 million in Marin County. And this was highly competitive pot of funding. I think there was about $2.4 billion available federally, and very few applicants were awarded funding. So we're really excited. It wouldn't have been possible unless we had all of those steps in play, right? If we didn't have your support through all of this, I don't think we would be in the position we're at now. So thank you very much for that. So moving on, I just want to say first steps, staffing. So we're really staffing up. We've spent the last several months staffing up. So the folks on the top there, you see a carbon farming program manager, working land scientist, and monitoring and GIS program managers. Those are all like new Marin RCD staff who are working out and going to be boots on the ground, working on getting projects, you know, out there on the landscape. The folks down below are a little bit different. They're sort of connected to the carbon farming program in different ways. And so Orlina is brand new with the Marin Carbon Project. She's the new coordinator, and she's coordinating things on a county-wide scale. So with different partnering agencies and folks in the farming community, she's coordinating us on that level. Emily Winfield is our regional soil health hub coordinator. So she's taking Marin County, Sonoma, Napa, Mendocino, bringing all the together and regionally trying to duplicate or replicate a lot of what's going on in Marin County on a regional scale. And then we have Chad White, who is working, some of you may or may not know, I know Larry is on the call, and Jeff Creek, you're on the call, but the Marin biomass study is taking a look at sort of biomass on a countywide scale, but also connecting up to statewide groups that are doing the same kind of work. And so that's important to us because there is an agricultural element to biomass, and we want to see how we can make those connections between the agricultural community and the urban community in the way of biomass, whether it's through compost or other means. So just to say that 6 months ago, only one of these people were here. so because of all that, the sort of turnaround in funding through Measure A, for example, we're able to really bring people on board to do this really important work. Okay, so moving on, what are we doing? So right now in the implementation queue, we have 6 riparian projects that are going to be, it should not say planned. It actually, they will be implemented in the next couple of years. So at 6 different ranches. So really excited about getting a lot more creek restoration done out there. And that's going to be done with Point Blue and their Students and Teachers Restoring a Watershed program. We'll also, I'm sure, definitely be coordinating with the Marin Agricultural Land Trust. And we also have a technical advisory committee that involves many of our local partners in selecting projects. So just to say there's a lot of credit to many of our partners in all of this. And then we'll be pursuing 6 water quality projects at dairies and ranches, water quality improvement projects, developing 6 carbon farm plans in the next couple of years. We'll have a total of 26 plans completed by 2025. And we're really trying to get those numbers up there because those are the documents that tell us exactly what kind of work we'll be doing in the next several years. And then will be 20 or more designs that will be that are currently in the queue. And so so that's just right now what's on the books. As Measure A continues, we will every year we'll have a technical advisory group that will select and rank projects that will then be implemented. Then I have a few maps. So these are just showing you the interest out there. So we have quite a bit of interest in the ag community. Everything in pink, those are folks who have plans or want projects. And so, so we're real excited about getting out to those folks and really coordinating. You'll see also shaded in there are the malt protected properties. So a lot of cooperation and coordination along those lines. And then this is a map showing you all of the projects that we have in queue right now. So as you can see, a lot of riparian restoration projects that will be completed through Measure A and the State Coastal Conservancy funds. And so we'll just continue to sort of collect those projects and put them in the queue. And then this is just an interesting map just to show you that we are really trying to make linkages on landscape levels to wildlife corridors, for example. So you can see the that sort of salmon color. Those are all of our carbon farming projects. And the yellow are the shovel-ready projects that we have in queue. And then we're also, if you can see all of these hatch marks, these are just wildlife corridors that we're trying to connect to other landscape areas. So we're just really trying to be very thoughtful about the projects that we select and how that is just making a bigger difference out there. And then finally, just to show you that we are also involving many communities in this work and being more deliberate about diversifying kind of the work that the folks that we're working with. And we're doing that through partnerships, through Point Blue's community college program. They work with students of color and provide internships and training opportunities. We're working with Point Blue Straw program and then Conservation Corps North Bay. And this map is really just showing you some of the like disadvantaged and severely disadvantaged communities out there as defined by the state. And so you'll see those shaded areas there. And then the triangles are some of the straw schools that we're working with that are located all around those areas. And then of course, Conservation Corps North Bay and some of the folks that are participating in Conservation Corps North Bay are also from these communities. So we're very deliberately trying to make those connections. And then finally, we're also working with the Federated Indians of Great and Rancheria on currently four of our riparian restoration projects so that we can incorporate traditional ecological knowledge into our designs. And so working with their sacred sites committees, which has been really fun and just really rewarding for us to be able to connect with some more folks around this. So so that's what I've got for an update on kind of where we've been and kind of how we've got there, and just again a lot of appreciation for the work that you have done for us and for getting us to this point.
Fantastic, Nancy. Thank you. Again, please, I'll just prompt folks, write your questions down or put them in the chat. And again, Jeff and Rich are helping track those, and we'll come back as we open up for panel discussion. The last part of that sustainable ag portion or element of Measure A is this broader community food system and community grant program. And as Kevin started to allude to, but I think we wanted to have him come back and even take a deeper dive and help us understand that a little bit more. So we're really lucky to have Kevin here, who many of you sound like you know Kevin. I heard some of the greetings and hellos at the beginning of the meeting, but Kevin with Marin County Parks and Government Affairs, it's been a real treat for me. I hadn't known Kevin, but just the way he can bring communities together, gather input, synthesize that, and start to shape this program. It's been very impressive. So Kevin, thank you for taking leadership on this exciting new opportunity for the county-wide food system through Measure A, and appreciate the chance to learn more about where we're at and how it'll move forward.
Well, thanks for your kind introduction. Nancy, I love that map of regional connectivity. I got to get that for me to put up on my wall. As I dive into this, I think you'll all notice that this grant program really draws on some of the expertise and positioning of the RCD and MALT. They're actually direct participants in a working group we've convened to help shape this program. And there's a real opportunity for some of our folks like the RCD to bring technical assistance support to some of the projects that will be developed through this grant program to make sure they're successful. So I really appreciate them as a kind of an ongoing resource and professionals in the community able to support us. I'm going to pull back up that slideshow presentation I had up so you can see that. Let's see. Great, and I'll just flip forward. We've talked about all this, and now we're here. And so I just want to begin with a timeline. Again, as I mentioned, Measure A was passed in June, and Max mentioned that around October, we started seeing money come into these program areas for the first time. So when the state collects these taxes, then they distribute them, and then we put them basically into what you can think of as like accounting buckets. And so this program will have its own bucket, and it'll accumulate funding over time. We'll collect that funding, and then it'll be granted out in the amount that it's received. So, you know, anywhere between, I think the first round may be somewhere between $450,000 and $600,000 toward the end of this fiscal year. And then in future rounds, it'll be roughly $800,000 a year, we think, going out toward grants for various purposes. We started way back in August, basically beginning to collect stakeholder input, conversations just like we're having today, that were either done online or in person. And I'll talk about some of the folks we've met with, but basically what I'll present to you now is kind of a mashup of all the input we received about both the types of projects that people might apply for, so we can anticipate those and how we design the grant guidelines, as well as what folks want the grant guidelines to look like, how they want the grant program to function so that it works for them and everyone who wants to implement projects in the community. We presented this program in concept to the Parks and Open Space Commission as an update. And now here we are in November, February, which is kind of this messy period where we continue to meet with groups across the community to talk about the program in general and hear their project ideas. But we're also beginning to put pencil to paper and develop these grant guidelines. And so currently our working group, which includes some of the folks here and others in the agricultural space, are thinking about grant guidelines that make sense for these types of grants. We'll continue this work, ultimately present this work and the grant program to the Board of Supervisors after meeting again with the Parks Commission, and then we'll actually launch the grants later this year, kind of into the summertime. So it's an exciting time and a lot happening. This is that working group I mentioned. Basically, it's in essence like an early steering committee of professionals who've been working in the space for a long time across the different areas of the grant program. So I mentioned MALT and the RCD. We also have Marin County Health and Human Services and the Healthy Eating Active Living Coalition, which includes groups like AIM. And they've been really doing a lot of community organizing around food systems and food access needs across the county. And so they have a number of different smaller coalitions that are basically putting together work plans that are perfectly suited to consider, you know, what types of needs we might fund through this program. Ag Weights and Measures, the Cooperative Extension, the Marin Food Policy Council, all really great partners who are helping us to think about this, as well as extending, I'm grateful to say, sort of their networks to help inform this grant program. So it's been really beneficial. So to date, all these early workshops have asked a couple of, sorry about that, key questions. One is, based on what you know about this grant program, what project needs do you have? What are some of your unfunded needs? And we've been collecting those project ideas. And then we've been soliciting ways that we can organize this grant program, as well as technical assistance needs that are needed to really advance some of the projects that are stalled or just don't have the support they need to move forward. So we met with a bunch of folks. We've had 3 working group meetings to date with the folks I mentioned. We've met with Healthy Eating Active Living Coalition, the Farm Bureau, HEAL implementation teams across the county. Marin Food Policy Council organized a great workshop for us. Point Blue, which is one of the partners mentioned, and then the Parks and Open Space Commission. And we're obviously meeting with you all here today. We'll be meeting with interested Indigenous leaders here next week on Thursday. So we continue to line up these meetings and basically collect this information so we can make the best grant program possible and consider all perspectives. There have been a whole range of project ideas, and just for this meeting, I thought it'd be helpful to throw together kind of samples, I would say, of each of the grant program areas. So, the unbulleted lines talk about these major program areas that I mentioned that were approved through the voter Measure A process. And then the bullets are some project ideas that have been thrown out there. So under the environmental restoration category, we have things like drought and water supply, access and protection, pollinator corridors, Marin County local projects and water catchment, carbon farming, ideas like hedgerows, organic composting, carbon farm plans have come up, things that you heard Nancy talk about. Under increasing access to low-cost farming and farmland, a whole bunch of ideas were brought up. Here are just a few: preparing open spaces, faith-based properties, and other sites available for farming to potentially get those online. That's things like fencing or, potentially like soil cleanup and things like that. Development of new water sources and water infrastructure to support agriculture on those properties. Direct grants to new farmers to purchase equipment or kind of get them mobilized. And you also see that there are a lot of project ideas just around training. So for folks who are just stepping into the space, especially from low-income communities, getting people the training they need to run effective businesses in these spaces. Also, something I heard Lily talk about, the whole concept of row cropping and potentially this effort to help larger agricultural landowners develop smaller areas of the properties to row crop or to lease out. Then under the local food supply, sustainability, and community gardens category, installing gardens in low-income community apartment buildings or in other spaces where they don't exist currently, where residents can engage with gardening and accessing healthy foods. There's also like a micro garden concept where people can actually, if they're in apartments and they just have like a little porch space, they could garden there. There's a lot of interest in helping to support the coordination among commercial kitchen spaces and providing storage areas, as well as support for micro businesses to come online. And you'll see at the bottom, there's this providing public access to working lands and this concept of gleaning. And there was a lot of interest in potentially creating cross-county pipelines between our agricultural lands where gleaning could occur at row cropping sites and other places. And then to get that agriculture to either schools or communities to support micro businesses or healthy school lunches. So those are just some examples of ideas that have been thrown out for these grant programs. As far as program structure, there have been a lot of ideas, especially around how to take such a broad-ranging grant program and focus it a little bit. There are actually a lot of different state, federal funding sources that can go toward various areas of agriculture and food systems. So one thing we're trying to do is figure out how to narrow this down for the most impact. And so we've actually begun to work with partners like the Marin Food Policy Council to basically bring together a spreadsheet of all the different funding sources available and to begin to work with partners to identify where funding is available and where funding gaps exist, both so we can invest this money that we have locally where it has the most impact and where there aren't other funding sources potentially, but also so when we engage with communities about their projects, we can share the whole range of funding sources available to them so that it just helps to build awareness overall. There's a big focus on equity across all partners we've talked about or talked with. Equity includes low-income communities. The healthy eating, active living planning work has really focused on some of Marin's low-income communities and communities of color and identifying their needs. So there are already networks and plannings in place to help us identify priority projects in those communities that we can invest in. The Farm Bureau and others emphasize spreading the money around to a lot of different needs, which makes a lot of sense for this program. And also there is a big emphasis on avoiding funding competition and using this program to really bring partners together doing similar work so they can play compatible roles. So there is, again, just a little bit more on program structure, emphasizing the use of a grant committee representing a range of backgrounds, and partly recognizing that when we were receiving these projects, a big need that we saw was that the project ideas weren't really ready to build, that a lot of them were conceptual and that would need some warm-handed support to kind of get ready for implementation or get them shovel ready. So one function of the working group is going to be to help to provide some of that technical assistance wherever possible. And this funding can also go toward some level of technical assistance and support to make sure that these projects have the support they need to get ready to build and are successful. We talked about basic nuts and bolts things like meeting the true administrative costs of organizations locally. So this grant program isn't sucking their staff capacity and their administrative capacity. And also things like targeted advance payments where maybe an organization is small and can't completely front the bill. These are all things that the state and their grant programs have addressed in various ways. So we have a lot of great models to look to and tend to have equity implications in some cases if organizations don't have the appropriate support. A lot of different technical assistance needs, as I mentioned, needing warm-handed support throughout the entire granting process, as well as before and after. Potentially fiscal sponsorship, which we see in the Measure A community grant program. So we do a bit of a dating game, helping folks to match up with potential fiscal sponsors so that someone with sort of fiscal accountability can receive the money and then work directly in a good relationship with the person implementing the project to be successful. Sharing best practices, evaluation, things like permitting and soil testing, all things that shouldn't be a surprise. That all amounts to the fact that I think across the board, we've identified that a grant program coordinator would be really useful. And in fact, we just launched this position announcement yesterday. So we're actively looking over the next month for qualified applicants to play this grant program coordinator position. And this person will do a number of things. One is to actually help to get this grant program over the finish line and manage it over time. It's a very active grant program, meaning that it's working very closely with community partners. It's constantly assessing community needs and working closely with this working group to make sure that applicants are successful. It's also a position that will be helping to coordinate or provide technical assistance throughout the grant making process to make sure that folks are successful and that their projects actually result in good work on the ground. So we're excited about this position and the candidates that we'll hopefully see over the next month, and we'll keep you informed about, and hopefully bring that person to this meeting the next time around. So today, as with these other workshops, I obviously welcome any questions you have, but I also specifically would be interested if you have any project ideas or thoughts about the grant program guidelines and how this grant program can operate. Or technical assistance needs, so we can continue to include that input as we develop the grant program here over the next couple months.
Kevin, thank you very, very much. I'm in the middle here of, hopefully I post this correctly. I believe that the link now for the program coordinator position is in the chat. So
thanks for doing that.
Yeah, so that folks, please grab that link. You may know somebody locally. It's always nice to find a local hero for something like this, but we are a part of a broader Bay Area network. So please share this opportunity with your networks if you would. It just literally opened, was it yesterday or day before, Kevin? Yeah,
yesterday. So it's fresh and ready to be sent out.
Right. So please, I appreciate any of you that might know someone or just a network to share this opportunity. And so with that, and Kevin, thank you. I really do mean it. You're being very purposeful and comprehensive with how you're taking in input and getting out into different parts of Marin's community and more broadly. And I think that's going to make this program really strong. So really appreciate that. And really also, from another perspective about this, Parks has experience with this kind of community grant making, and then is now partnering with those of us in the food system part of the world to kind of merge superpowers, if you will. So it just feels like a very good fit. Let me undo there we go. So let's open things up. We did need to say let Max go. He had something else at 10:30, but we still have Lily, Nancy, and Kevin with us and can start to field questions. I think there was one primary one, and it's kind of being addressed already a little bit by Nancy, but we had a question there about, can Measure A funds, or are they available to be used on the Point Reyes National Seashore, the National Parks land? And Nancy, briefly explained from the RCD's perspective and for not just perspective, but by policy, that the answer is no, and that's generally the case. Measure A, as it was written and approved by the voters, excluded federal lands. So I don't know if that helps. I know Nona's question.
I think that's up for debate, whether or not that was in the ordinance.
Okay.
Itself.
Okay.
Yeah. But I know that once it trickled down to the RCD, that was certainly included in our agreement, was that those funds would not be used on state or federal lands.
David, actually, there's nothing in Measure A or the addendum to Measure A or the general agreements with the landowners. That was something that was required by the county, and it's not just state, it also applies, not just federal, it also applies to state lands as well.
So say that one more time, Jerry, please, so that everybody hears it correctly.
Yeah, there was nothing in Measure A or the work plan that was Attachment A or the landowner agreement documents that prohibit the use of Measure A funds out at the seashore or on state parklands, but that was required by the county when we signed an agreement. The RCD signed an agreement with the county, but that could be revised by the county. It wouldn't have to go back to the voters.
Okay, so something to consider as we're taking deeper dives into the implementation of the General Management Plan Amendment. From a Marine Conservation League perspective, do those funds represent an opportunity, and could we work in terms of our policies on that topic? That's very helpful, Jerry. Thank you. Nona, is this in relation to this topic?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
I want to add just a couple of words. Since Phyllis's passing is so recent, less than 2 weeks, and we're doing a lot of history now, and the beginnings of Ellen's and her idea, which was to institute the easement program of Walt. She's going to be honored by the Board of Supervisors this coming Tuesday, the meeting on Tuesday, following the open comment period. So that'll be early in the meeting, just to let you know. And second, I really want to call out to someone, Bob Berner, who's on the call here, and the role that he played for 28 years, along with people like Ralph Grossi and others who were able to make Phyllis and Ellen's dream come true and make it a reality. So just to augment the fact that this is a moment to remember Phyllis and her legacy.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Nona, she's been mentioned a couple times today. Thank you, Lily, for bringing up Phyllis's memory as well.
David, Rick here.
So go ahead, Rick.
Just perhaps Nancy could clarify, because we saw the new staff and the resources. So at the moment, Measure A funds are not going to be used on federal or state property, but the Marin RCD and the resources it has is coordinating with those entities. And if Nancy can clarify so we all understand what type of coordination is underway.
With federal or state partners, or with all of our partners?
Just the federal and state.
Okay.
I don't want people to go away thinking that the RCD isn't collaborating with the feds and state.
I see. Gotcha. Yeah. Well, we actually are, and now this is outside of Measure A, but we are working with ranches in the seashore. We currently have a contract with the seashore to provide technical assistance to those ranchers out there. And the way that we're doing that is we have a couple of the staff, as Rick, you mentioned on that screen. So one of them was the GIS and project monitor. So he's going out and monitoring water, taking water quality samples, in addition to doing residual dry matter sampling on those ranches. And then we have another staff person who was not on the screen, and that's Simone Albuquerque, and she is working on our water quality program. So she's working to help provide assistance to those farmers. Whenever they, of course, need to do a project, they need to go through NEPA or CEQA compliance. And so she's navigating that for them. So for the few ranches out there who are doing restoration projects, there are also pond projects that are being, pond repair projects that are underway. So she's assisting with those efforts as well. So that's how we're working with those federal partners.
Thank you.
I'll add just a couple fine points, and Jerry, please forgive me, but I think it's important that everyone understands that you are one of the board members for an elected board member for the RCD. So it's really appreciate your expertise and knowledge about the partnership, and Nancy, you've represented that as well. There are ranches on the seashore that also have what are called EQIP grants. These are grants directly from the Natural Resources Conservation Service. So there is technical financial assistance to those ranches. I think the question that's being proposed today and that we're finding a conversation point about is how can, or in the future could, Measure A funds also be part of that recipe of technical and financial assistance? And so that might be something for MCL to consider going forward. I want to point out, and you can look at the agenda for the upcoming Parks Committee, that there'll be a discussion about funding sources and options. I think, and Terry, you're on. I don't know if, or Nona, if you want to describe that agenda item a little bit. I think it's relevant to this thread that we have going right now about funding for the park and for continued support of any general management plan amendment implementation. Go ahead, Terry. I see you unmuted. Yeah.
Hi, everybody. It's nice to be here. So, David, you're speaking about our possible addition of the.
I thought I saw on an agenda. Did I preempt you? I apologize. I just saw something about a funding source agenda item.
Oh, at Parks and Open Space.
Correct.
Meeting. Correct. Well, actually, Jerry is the one that is facilitating that. So, Jerry, you want to give a little description of what you're going to present on Thursday, the 9th of February?
Okay, basically it's a description of the need for more funding for a variety of purposes at the seashore. There are 4 categories. One is equity, the lack of people being able to get out to the seashore if they're low income. Another is housing for park staff. Another is ecological restoration on ranch lands, on all the lands actually at the seashore. And also the question of fire control. And so it's basically a kind of a PowerPoint about those subjects and possible funding sources.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jerry.
That's perfect. Thank you both. I just wanted to make sure folks knew about that, the overlap.
Absolutely. Please join us.
Yeah. So again, that's the 9th.
Thursday, the 9th at 10 o'clock in the morning. We changed our time from 3 in the afternoon till 10 in the morning.
Great. Great. So let's kind of come back to Measure A then, and I don't know if there's questions about conservation easement, but questions for Kevin about the grant program or the RCD activities. Ed, I see your hand up. Go for it. Unmute yourself there. There you go.
For the federal seashore, the people eligible for DRAWS program.
Yeah.
Question. I don't know if that's hers or but
Yeah, Lily. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, that can come to me. So MALT has provided DRAWS grants to a few ranches on the seashore. And so
Great.
that is availability because we have private donor related funds that aren't tied to federal or state funding.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Lily, can I pause and prompt you to maybe briefly explain the DRAWS program, the acronym, and also the recent recognition it received?
Yeah, and I see Scott's on here too, if he still is.
Oh, that's
but-
great. Okay, I didn't know.
So
I didn't
he
pick
can
up.
jump in as well if he wants, but we have, there he is. So the DRAWS program is one of our kind of incentive-based programs to help support farming and ranching across Marin County, not just on malted easements. And so the DRAWS program is, the acronym is Drought Resilience and Water Security. And it was an initiative that was launched last year in April of 2021 to help Marin County ranchers and farmers invest in drought resilience practices. And so I'll let Scott kind of jump in here and talk about the impact of that we've had recently and the amount of money as well as this recognition that we got.
Yeah, thanks, Lily. Yeah, I mean, that pretty much hits the nail on the head there, and really DRAWS is oriented towards assisting everybody regardless, everybody in Marin County, regardless of agricultural system, location, easement status. The idea is simply just to assist, and we've been seeing a lot of opportunity to help leverage our partners' fundings to working with Point Blue, working with the RCD to be able to sort of provide a niche access to water for folks and to help assist in whether it be a restoration or any sort of planting, you name it. And so we're up to 70 projects approved now. We've earmarked over $850,000 since that April of 2021, including we're now at four completed projects out in the seashore. Thank you for your question, Ed. And like David mentioned, recently was awarded the Excellence in Innovation Award from CVNL, and pretty incredible honor, and just so thrilled to keep this going. And really the name of the game is just being able to support the community out here. So.
And just as another piece of that is that that MALT has another program called the Stewardship Assistance Program, the SAP funding, and that's for easement holders. And so these are two separate pots of money. And so we're able to support better stewardship of land, increased technology, all those pieces that are really meant to support producers and ranchers and farmers on both malted easements and non-malted lands across Marin County. And so those are funds that are actively available, and the DRAWS funds are available now. And so if you know of anybody who needs support in this way, please let us know, because we're actively recruiting and funding these projects.
Gordon, I see your hand up, but let me ask Lily here just to really help us draw some distinctions. So Measure A will be part of supporting through a grant application from MALT acquisitions of conservation easements. And then you have these other programs, DRAWS, SAP, that then support stewardship, and that's a different funding source.
That's privately, that's private philanthropy. And so we've got, really great supporters, and we are, actively out engaging our broad network to bring in private dollars that then can be matched both to the easement acquisition, but then also for these programs like SAP and DRAWS. And the really exciting piece of that is that these funds, these private philanthropic dollars, are really flexible. And so we can jump on projects and then be able to kickstart something that then maybe the RCD can come in and fund with bigger dollars. And so we have a really great partnership and relationship with other organizations and agencies, but the ability to bring in these private dollars and use them quickly with minimal restrictions is a big benefit that I think MALT brings to the table.
And then let me ask two more questions about Measure A and how it supports MALT's conservation acquisition. It can support other organizations' conservation easement acquisition, correct? And I want to be really clear with you, or have you help us understand, does MALT get money directly from Measure A, or how does that work, that funds support an acquisition of a conservation easement?
Yeah, it's not earmarked for malt at all, Measure A. It's the funds are for accredited land trust. And so any accredited land trust can apply through a grant process through the county for Measure A funds. And so that's the process that malt does with each of our easements. And so we go through the process, and it's a competitive grant award in a sense.
And then the funds they don't ever go directly to malt, right? How does that work?
They come, yeah, for the easement, it's a pass-through, so we get the funding and then it goes directly out. We match it, and it might hold with us for a short amount of time, but really it's then going directly to the landowner with the other 50% match of funds that we bring in, and then pays for the purchase of a conservation easement, which is really extinguishing development rights on properties.
Perfect. And then my last question, and then Gordon, we will give you the floor. Your board is structured as a mix of agricultural producers, local Marin ranchers, and others, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And a current board member receive an easement? How does that work?
No, we have strict conflict of interest policies that are updated on a regular basis. And board members cannot receive easements. They can't, and not only board members, but associated family members, staff. We have a list of conflicts that really are up with the Land Trust Alliance, which is a national organization that accredits organizations like MALT. And so we are, up to date. We've got a fantastic board now that's comprised of 50% agricultural community. And I think we're at 18 right now is our number. So it's a big board and really engaged. And then the board members, and then also staff and associated folks can't receive draws or SAP funding as well too. So there's pretty straightforward conflicts that we're happy to share. And then we keep them updated. And so myself coming in within this first year, we're going to dig into making sure that those conflicts are still up to date, because the last time we updated them was about a year and a half ago. So we're constantly on that. And we have outside counsel as well that helps us and supports us in not only the transactions, but making sure that we're up to these land trust accreditation standards.
Yeah, great. No, that context is very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Gordon, please, I don't know which part your hand got raised for. I just wanted to help Lily and understand all those facets.
Sure. This is a comment and a question on the DRAWS program. To the extent the DRAWS program helps ranchers use existing water sources more efficiently, I think it's great. But if the DRAWS program moves over to developing new sources of water, it runs the risk of being a de facto transfer of scarce water from wildlife that use the water to livestock. So the question is there been any environmental impact study done on these projects that develop new water sources that have the potential of removing water sources from wildlife and transferring it to livestock?
That's a great question. Scott, go ahead.
So with any project that requires a development of a new source, namely wells, we absolutely require a county permit in order to fund the project. We don't do new springs very often. It's usually existing documented springs that have either just been completely sedimented in or just need upgrading. So there's a fair amount of consideration that goes into any of these projects too. And then often for troughs, if there's a new trough, we usually, we always ask for wildlife friendly escape routes or any sort of those sort of little stipulations in there too. So.
And just to add to the DRAWS program, it acts like a small grant program. And so it's a $15,000 cap and it's reimbursable. So the farmer or rancher applies, and then the project gets approved by our staff, and then they do the project, and then we reimburse them up to $15,000.
Great. Thanks for your question, Gordon. And maybe at some point we get a fuller, deeper dive into draws and SAP at this committee in the future. So I see Nona's hand. Let me remind folks, if you're not with your hand up or not asking a question, please go ahead and mute, and that'll just help us with some of that background noise, pets and such, or maybe even you're having some landscaping done or construction. Nona, you have the floor.
Yeah, just to follow up on Gordon's concerns, we've found, really the one response that you've got a county permit is not reassuring to us, because we found long ago the county permit really is focused on health and not on availability of water. So these other precautionary moves that you're making are somewhat reassuring, but Gordon makes a real point that we've been concerned about, MCL have been concerned about for many years, and that is that taking water out of base flow and moving it into a developed source for livestock is not reassuring to us. So we urge you to continue to make all kinds of precautionary moves to avoid depleting base flow in order to develop it as a source for stock. So thanks very much. And anybody else want to add to that? I'm open. Well,
I'll just kind of add some formal policy steps that I know are in place already, that have been in place for at least in 2008, 2009. So the North Coast in-stream flow policy has then rippled through, and the state board has a division of water rights. So draws has to comply with those in terms of not developing any in-channel kinds of storage or diversion, and similarly has to account for whether it's developing going back and restoring the development of existing springs that have been used, and has to account for if it's taking on new springs. And Scott, you mentioned that draws doesn't work on new springs at this stage, but that would be another point of MCL learning to do, would be on that North Coast in-stream flow policy, and how that has then informed water rights and water development, and really regulates the reduction or the your concern there, Nona, of taking additional water out of in-stream flows, base flow, if you will. That's why that policy was written, and Jared Huffman led the development and the issuing of that policy, and then it's worked through the Division of Water Rights.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep. I want to, we're here at about an hour and a half, and I just want to say, to our panel members, thank you. I don't see any other immediate questions. Some nice compliments in the chat there to all of you and the ways in which Measure A is working. I think, value add all the way around in terms of how the 20% of Measure A that's going to the Sustainable Ag Program, lots of evolution and growth in this extension of Measure A from its original intent. I really appreciate, Nona, you mentioning that Bob Berner is on, and kind of going back to when Measure A was first thought of and introduced. And Susan, I already thanked you once, but just your willingness to step in and lead from MCL's perspective and partner on its extension, not just for the sustainable ag portion, but for all of it, and how that's going to benefit Marin going forward. So, so with that, anything else, or just a quick round of applause, if you will? You can use your confetti or clapped hands or thumbs up, but just thank you to our three panel members, Kevin, Nancy, Lily. Really appreciate your time here. And I'll move us to our next agenda item if there's not any more burning questions. Yeah.
Thanks for having us, David.
Yeah, it's our pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and please, if the three of you, if there's anything you want to say in closing, I'm happy to entertain that too. Okay. All right.
David, just real quick, I'll just say I'll circle back in 2-3 months as the program really comes together to give this group an update. So I look forward to it.
Definitely. We'll make a standing agenda item, and when you're ready, you think you have an update, I think this group will appreciate seeing like the grant call, or even like hearing who's applying, what kinds of grants are getting funded. That would be great.
Excellent.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
great. Just really would love to come back and give an update alongside everyone else, whenever that need comes about.
Yeah, maybe we'll, in working with Rick and Jeff, we'll just know that we want to think about like maybe an annual update. That
Okay,
would be perfect. Yeah.
great.
As it
Yeah,
pertains
happy to
the-
participate too. So,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Yeah, as it pertains to the 20% portion, the sustainable ag portion of Measure A. And again, want to reiterate that our Parks and Open Space Committee definitely works closely with parks on all kinds of other opportunities, policy opportunities, and we'll be bringing up that other part of Measure A. And MCL has a deep interest in fire fuels management. So as Parks is doing that kind of work through Measure A, we'll be wanting to engage and learn about that. Then with that, let's move to our second agenda item, and it deserves a little bit of context, and then also just some next steps. And I know there are a couple folks on our call still that have been part of this, but kind of to back up, Marin Conservation League has a climate action work group, and that work group nearly 2 years ago now did a great job of pulling together a climate management policy statement. And that policy statement now has been approved and is out in terms of use by MCL as it advocates for different issues around climate management. In doing that work, 3 areas of deeper focus were identified. One was sea level rise, one was carbon sequestration, and one was biodiversity. And we've had different efforts and different levels of progress made in each of those 3 areas. For sea level rise, Paul Jensen and lots of board members, along with friends of Marin Conservation League, led an effort to write a policy statement and have it, improved and reviewed until it was brought to the board and approved last year. So that's the first one, and we can make that available to you. For those that registered earlier in the week, I was able to share with you the other 2. The biodiversity and the carbon sequestration policy statements are at fairly advanced levels of drafting. Lots of different input from board members and quote friends of Marin Conservation League on both policy statements. And they are now at a stage of finalization and being considered. And at some point over this next 12 months, the board's calendar will be brought to the Marin Conservation League board for approval as well. It wasn't necessarily our intent today to do wordsmithing, although I really want to recognize and appreciate those that have already gotten comments to me for the carbon sequestration policy statement. It's actually carbon sequestration and biomass management. I welcome those comments to me over the next few weeks into the next month or so. We hope that the carbon sequestration policy statement will go to the board in February or March, probably more like March, given other priorities for the board. So that's on a little shorter timeline. It's been being worked on longer and is at a further stage of readiness. The biodiversity statement's in a very good place as well, and now is going to be considered and discussed, has already been discussed at the Parks and Open Space and will continue to be advanced. But similarly, somewhere through this next calendar year for the board will be brought for approval. And if you have specific comments, I would say please share those with Terry Thomas. You can send them to me and I will route them to her. But as the Parks and Open Space and her leader, through her leadership, that's how that policy statement will be advanced. I hope you saw connections today between what's happening in Measure A, priorities for malt around biodiversity, the RCD around carbon farming, and issues around fuels management and the appropriate ecological management of fuels in our oak woodlands and our forests. That there's connections between today's topic, Measure A, and those policy statements. And just to remind you that these policy statements are developed, and we have many of them, Marin Conservation League, that then let Marin Conservation League more, I should say, in a timely way, in a more immediate way, be able to respond to proposed projects, to weigh in, explain what our policies are and how we might support or not support a project. So that's why we develop policy statements to begin with. I'll pause and I see Nona's hand is up, but you know, if there's general questions about the origins of these three, the sea level rise, carbon sequestration, and biodiversity, or comments on the two that were shared with you in advance of this meeting, please, we can open it up for discussion. Nona, the floor is yours.
Yeah, just to clarify, I think it's a very, very important distinction between and among these policies. They all have to do with climate, but two of them really are focused on adaptation, and that would be, of course, sea level rise and biodiversity. The third one, which is on carbon sequestration, is very much focused on mitigation. That is to say, the reduction of emitting greenhouse gases into the atmosphere that exacerbate and lead to climate change, or cause of it. So I think we need to make that point, that we're really addressing what I call the twin sides. One of them, extremely important, is how to reduce emissions. The other is, given the fact that we are already emitting, we're already having under a climate change, how do we adapt to it most effectively in the future? So just to make that distinction.
Perfect. Yeah. So I'm going to load the two draft policies in the chat as well. And just for those that registered a few days right before this meeting, I didn't get a chance to send you those. So want to make sure everybody has the chance to have those. And again, I'll just reiterate, if you have comments on the carbon sequestration policy, please route those comments to me. And some of you already have, so thank you for that. And the biodiversity policy statement, thoughts, ideas would go to Terry Thomas. You can, again, send them to me and I'll route them to her if you don't have her contact information. So both are now in the chat or coming for you. Other thoughts or just questions about the background, the origins of this? We're excited. I will say from a board perspective, the great work and leadership of a former board member, Doug Wilson, and then Pam Reeves, and now Bob Miller leading our climate action work group, really was the starting point of this. And by bringing these three policy statements to completion, it's a way of honoring his work and his leadership on climate management. And so they're important to us from both a policy perspective and to continue and to complete the work of a former board member. Other thoughts? Any other questions? Well, again, then we don't have to stay on longer than needed. Rich, yeah, Rick, did you?
Well, perhaps just to explain, so once these policy statements are approved, and then it'll be the official position of MCL, and what does MCL hope to achieve with them?
Yeah, I'll take one more stab at trying to explain that, and then other board members, please, you might have more concrete example. You know, for example, we have an agricultural policy statement. That policy statement allowed Marine Conservation League to consider Measure A and really dig in and explain within the sustainable ag portion why that sustainable ag portion is important, or why conservation easements are important. So by having that policy statement ready, MCL then can very adeptly and very quickly respond to and provide letters of advocacy, critique, feedback. Marine Conservation League has a number of policy statements on a number of topics that lets us then be quick and responsive, both in our advocacy and in our critique and feedback. Nona, other examples or ways you'd say that?
Yeah, just to add to it, from the perspective of about 25 years of being on the board of MCL, I think others who have been longtime members will recognize it, that we often, as David has pointed out, we need to be agile, and at the same time, we need to kind of understand. We have new board members coming on, and we have a lot of kind of legacy issues in which we have advocated over the years. Water supply is one of them. The watershed of Mount Tam is another. Endangered species, and a number of issues we've addressed time and time again over the years. And sometimes we've had Housing is another example. We have had a kind of an agreed upon policy position. Sometimes we have not. We took a position on measure, what was it, Q, the smart. And we lost members and we gained members because it was a controversial issue. And we took a firm position. So anyway, it helps us, it helps the board as new people come on to articulate really kind of where we are without going into great detail, but in a broad sense to articulate our positions on issues. And certainly climate change has been evolving over a number of years, and we've needed to put down really in writing what do we believe, what can we advocate for, as David is pointing out. How can we be agile as new issues, as new shall we see new examples come to the fore? So that's, I just wanted to expand on from a historic perspective, David, your clear explanation, which is really, it enables us to respond quickly to as new examples come on board as advocates.
Yeah, perfect. I think what maybe is helpful for those that aren't intimate to how the board and MCL works, in any given week, there are letters going from the board signed by the president or vice president, you know, in a moment of needing to delegate, going to an agency, going to a local commission, you know, from planning commission to parks commission, going to a state agency like Department of Conservation. And that's really the work of MCL, is to write those letters and send them to the relevant agency at the right time in the process of a project or a policy being developed. You don't always see those letters, although we have them archived, we have them ready, imminently available. They're out there in the public forum, so they are, you know, transparent in that way. But being able to do that work is really supported and facilitated by these policy statements. They also let a board member, you know, through the appropriate committee, go to the podium at a planning commission or represent MCL's position in a very informed way, and again, in a very timely way. I hope that helps further. Well, it is 11:10, and I just want to say thank you to all of you. Ed, you quick comment, quick question?
I don't know if it's appropriate at this time, but can we adjourn today's meeting in memory of Phyllis Faber?
It's entirely appropriate. We can do that. Yep. And I think that will be happening at several venues and forums over the next weeks and months. And as Nona mentioned, please, you know, if you can make it to the Board of Supervisors meeting next Tuesday, in that first hour to 2 hours of the meeting, they'll be honoring her again. So let's do that then. And if there's not anything else for the good of the order, we will close in honor of Phyllis Faber and wish you all the best this Friday afternoon. Look out across Marin's open lands and conserved agricultural lands and think of her today.